moving on to Yahoo, this is a story of international intrigue relating to cookies and hash browns, or something like that. So, you're laughing now. I think this is what the Yahoo executives were thinking. So, brief summary of what happened, because this has been developing over the last year, just like Equifax will be developing in the near future. They've lost all Yahoo accounts have been hacked at some point. If you had an account with Yahoo in 2013, it's been hacked. But it all started out September 2016, 500 million accounts. They said this is a state-sponsored actor. They don't say who it is, but I'm going to go out there and make a guess because I'm up here. I might as well. You may recall that Yahoo got into a lot of trouble for outing Chinese dissidents. And I think there was a lot of backlash from that. And so maybe they stopped giving that information to China, and China said, well, we're going to get that information for ourselves. And they may have gotten that way. 500 million accounts, September 2016. December 2016, we have another billion accounts stolen. They weren't able to identify who did this. We don't know who did it. We don't know how they got in. Then in November, December, they said, hey, we have 32 million other accounts. And somebody forged cookies. And an executive at Yahoo said, you went foraging for cookies? What do you mean? How did this cookie thing work? So, yeah, cookies on your set by a browser. Basically, the other side was able to forge cookies, and that allowed them to bypass all authentication mechanisms within Yahoo. So it didn't matter if you had a password and two-factor authentication like I did. They didn't need any passwords. They just forged the cookies, and they got 32 million access. And October 2017, just beginning of this month, they said, oh, by the way, when we told you of 1 billion accounts back in December, it's actually all 3 billion accounts. Every account that we have was accessed, and we came upon new information. Well, they don't say where they got the new information. I don't think they have an application to, but they also don't say what the information is. But we know that they were all exposed. But in our minds, it's not so much that the breach happened and this backstory. It's the lessons learned from it. What went wrong? Well, they took a lot of time to do it, but let's take a look at Yahoo was a public company at the time, and they had to issue public documents to the SEC describing some of this process. And they talk about how significant additional measures were implemented in response to 2014, but certain executives did not properly comprehend or investigate, therefore failed to act sufficiently upon the full extent of knowledge of internally by company's information security team. Let's stop right there and analyze this. I think what this is saying is that as part of the information security team, you may know things that a senior executive, a CEO, or board level simply may not. But that has to be escalated to the executive level in a reasonable, detailed, but not mind-boggling manner. They shouldn't have to think that they are foraging for cookies or that they're eating hash browns when they talk about hash passwords. So it has to be properly communicated. And in this case, it wasn't. And let's read a little bit between the lines, and let's talk about what we know. The CEO, Marissa Mayer, she did not take her 2017 bonus. Their deputy general counsel resigned without any additional payments. So I think what ended up happening here is something along the line failed. The communications to the CEO board level didn't happen the way it should have. Or even if it was, the detail wasn't there, or even if it was communicated, the people in charge did not understand it.
Think about that happening at Yahoo, which means that if you find that you have an incident arising at your company, and you're pretty sure that there's something worth looking into, it doesn't necessarily mean that when you go to present it to the next level up, that they're either going to appreciate it, or frankly even want to hear about it. You may face resistance.
Right. And they go on to, the SEC 10K goes on to explain this. The information security team understood that the attacker had exfiltrated copies of your database. Unclear and whether to what extent such evidence of exfiltration was effectively communicated and understood outside the information security team. So you have to escalate, you have to communicate all of them effectively, but on top of that, you may have an obligation to ensure that the individual understands all of it, they comprehend it. Check me. Do you understand? We're not foraging for cookies. And but one of the other conclusions here that I think it's worth noting is that they're saying that they were not adequately advised. I think this is where the general counsel comes in. And for the attorneys in the room and ourselves, having been in-house, having worked on information security and data breach incidents, both in-house and outside, this line between adequately informing executives in the board and glossing over detail can be very difficult. And you have to be able to not put them to sleep, but also make them understand that there is a large risk here. And depending on the kind of organization you're in, it may be an uphill battle and it might be impossible. There are simply organizations out there that are unwilling to recognize that they're going to have a data breach and they're going to have a substantial financial obligation as a result of this. SEC is likely investigating this. I have no doubt that the FTC is as well, and they may be in FTC enforcement action. Because Yahoo has privacy policies, just like other entities out there, that specifically say, we take the privacy and security of your information seriously. You had this breach. Did you? No, you didn't. Unfair deceptive trade practices, FTC Section 5. So we're back to the first set of slides. So they had to take corrective actions. This is all from, once again, SEC 10K. Revision of technical legal information security incident response protocols. So the procedures didn't work. With escalation, right? You have to be able to escalate. Rigorous forensic expert examination. So maybe when they looked at it, they didn't look at it properly. They didn't properly escalate it. Rigorous assessment and documenting of legal reporting obligations. Did somebody say, it's just email addresses and passwords. We don't have an obligation to report those. Well, state breach notification laws are changing. They include things such as emails and passwords. But if somebody has access to your email address, what is the underlying data? A lot of us store a lot of sensitive personal information in our emails. So some of that is. So even if the state breach notification law is down here and says maybe you don't have to notify it, where does that leave you as a brand? You have to rise to that level, but should you rise above that and notify sooner and earlier, fully? Comprehensive risk assessments and effective cross-functional communication in the event of cybersecurity events. Something clearly broke down here between the information security team, legal team, then the CE and the board. And appropriate timely disclosure of material security incidents. I think they understand that because they didn't disclose it in time, and because Verizon paid $350 million less for the acquisition of Yahoo, that there was damage to shareholders. Now, if you're thinking about risks from an information security incident, what are my liabilities? Your customers will sue you in a class action lawsuit. Your shareholders may sue you because now they have less profit in your company, and employees may sue you because you breached their data, among other regulatory lawsuits that may happen. But those are all things to keep in mind. But let's take a step back, and how does this affect us? This is not law. This is, if you will, how one company is reacting to a data breach from its board and CEO perspective. Right? It is just one company. It doesn't make a trend. But I think it asks a fundamental question, having fired the general counsel of this company. Who is responsible for a data breach? I would argue, by having done this internally and outside, that data breach response is a business issue, that it is the job of the information security team to find them out, to analyze them, to escalate them, and to remedy them. I think, and having been involved in this, an attorney is crucial in this process, especially to provide it with attorney-client privilege that an in-house attorney has a tough time doing. An information security professional in-house cannot privilege a document, because that's how you protect the corporation, is to privilege these communications and these analyses. So you can say, we looked at all this and we screwed up everything. Nobody should know about this, so they can come and sue us because they collect all our money. That is, in a way, if you have that kind of confidential, privileged information that you're providing to your attorney, you had an obligation to reasonably investigate, but you didn't, and you're providing that legal conclusion, that should be attorney-client privileged legal guidance that you provide. You shouldn't be forced to provide that in a court of law, court of public opinion for that matter, right? Because our jobs as attorneys is to protect the corporation, as you know, sour of a taste it may leave in our minds in this kind of situation, right? But who should be responsible? Arguably, the business should be responsible, and we have to communicate effectively. And you do need to ensure that you work through this process in advance before dealing with it for the first time. What we see with respect to, hey, we started out with 500 million, then we went up to $1 billion, then it added another 32 million, then all $3 billion, you shouldn't see those kind of massive increases. it is absolutely normal to look at a data breach or a data security incident and say, hey, I have 100 records, and then go up to 200, 300, 400. A billion to 3 billion, something in the analysis of that breach has gone wrong.